All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, Dr. Dan. Hello, Alexei. How are you guys doing?
Good evening. I'm doing well. Good to be here.
Dan is our special guest tonight. And Dan, aren't you the founder and president of the Anxiety Institute? And
yes, that's right.
You've been on before, and I introduced you before, but for new people. And you do, what, is it clinical work with youth at the Anxiety Institute, or?
Yeah, so I'm a psychologist by training, but I opened up an intensive day treatment program for teenagers and young adults. We have 4 locations around the U.S. and each serve about 10 to 15 clients on an intensive format. So they're coming 4 hours a day every day for several months for severe anxiety and OCD.
And of course, people know Alexei. How are you doing, Alexei?
I'm good.
A lot of Alexei is almost like a co-host at this point. But
I'm happy. Good night. How are you doing?
Good. I'm glad to see you guys.
Yeah.
I know you also from Twitter, Dan, right? And so I also know that you're very interested in the whole UFP thing, like we all are. And I thought it would be interesting to have you back and talk about, I don't know, maybe I can get some therapy tonight. I mean, I have this thing where there's certain things that bug me. One of them is like catchphrases, right? And I guess the most recent one is catastrophic disclosure. And I did this simple search on X, previously known as Twitter. And I just simply did, typed in catastrophic disclosure, and there's just an endless supply of video, posts about catastrophic disclosure, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what condition that's called. The other catchphrase that drives me nuts is existential threat. So I did another search. Existential threat. Is this OCD or what is this?
I think it's just doing some good due diligence before a show, and obviously picking up on some trends too. I did actually hear it, when in our chat earlier. I was like, haven't heard too much about that. I actually took about a month break from Twitter or X. Just wanted to kind of go off the grid for a bit and see what that was like, because I was on it pretty relentlessly. So I just sort of started kind of getting back online about a week ago. So
I think what it is these platforms and the way they track your activity. So you're almost fed, right? You're really, so it's not that I'm interested in existential threats, or it's just that, if I read a couple of posts, now it seems like what's in my feed is just that. Sometimes I wonder if that is the only thing on X. Sometimes I honestly wonder if are there other communities out there besides the UAP community on X? Have you all ever
heard that? Jump in real quick.
No,
that's what I call an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Have you heard that term? It's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And so just real quick, they're always talking about the synchronicities that happen on UFO Twitter. It's like
synchronicity is another one.
Half of that's an echo chamber.
I was going to say, you create the synchronicity. You're creating the synchronicity. But so I don't know.
The algorithm is obviously set up that way, and it sort of works. But yeah, I'll find, obviously, if I'm clicking on things and then it'll, I'll go further into that sort of that hole of interest. And yeah, I mean, that's just how it's built, and it can be very easy to forget that you're in an echo chamber. And one's going to be sort of cognizant of that at all times, I think.
I guess, I don't know. I didn't mean to turn this into a therapy session, but I think one of the other thing that kind of bothers me is just the little tribes that come up around certain issues. You'll have, and if you're not in the tribe and you have a difference of opinion, you're sort of an outcast or whatever. And I have a few examples, but they're kind of petty, so I don't know if we want to talk about it or not. But you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about, Dan or Alexei?
I mean, I'll say one thing that I found really interesting recently is sometimes how much thought I put into not just the post, but the reaction to the post. A fear of sort of siding too much with one side, or a fear of actually communicating my real opinion. There was a post tonight. It was related to Israel and Palestine, and I was going to send it. I was kind of a good post. Most of them, I write and they're just fluff and crap, and then you get one that's good. And this was one of them, and I just held back, just in fear of the retribution.
Well, I learned a lesson about that recently, a couple of weeks ago. And first of all, I hope Gary doesn't mind me talking about this, Gary Nolan. And I have a lot of respect for Gary. And so I was really surprised this happened. Apparently, he was reading some of my posts. I guess he felt like one of them was not appropriate. I couldn't figure out which one it was. And of course, I learned a lesson from it, right? It's just exactly what you're talking about. But he had ended up blocking me, but he didn't know who I was on Twitter. But we had been talking through email about him coming on the show. So he didn't connect that I was that person, Artisan Tony. He just thought of me as the PiFi show because I used that email address. Mm-hmm. So you see, it was kind of embarrassing to me, and I learned a lesson. I didn't realize people were really paying that much attention to the things I post. And so now, unfortunately, I'm a little paranoid about the things I post. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I need to be a little more careful about, the Israel Hamas things is a good example. You want to show support, but there's so many, when this seems to be split down the middle as far as the opinions, you can get, in trouble for your opinions.
Yeah.
Now, all that said, I want Gary. I don't think he watches my videos, but if he happens to, I still have a lot of respect for him. And he unblocked me, and hopefully he's going to come on the show and all that. I don't see that it was. It's not. This is not a criticism of him. It was just a situation that you reminded me of when you were talking about being, thoughtful about your posts.
Yeah. No, I think it's something that, everyone worries about to some extent. I mean, there are people that don't, and they're usually not identifying themselves. They've got a fake name, or, it's be very easy to just say whatever you want without, having your name, your real name there. And I think, I don't know, maybe it should even be a rule that you have to put your name there. That would probably really change this whole dynamics of it, and maybe even the health of it, actually.
I have mixed emotions about that, or about the platform providing a place for anonymity. That's the word. I have to say the word. It's hard when you're from Tennessee to say that word. But I go back and forth on that issue. It's kind of like, some people may need the privacy. But I agree. I probably should use my real name. I think maybe when you reach a certain level of popularity on any kind of platform, maybe you should use your real name. But
yeah,
in my case, my name's so public anyway because it's kind of associated with my construction company. If anybody, most people know my real name anyway. So, but
so I've been very impressed, Tony, with the guests that you've had on your show.
Well, you're one of them. You and Alexei are quite impressive, I think.
Well, I really enjoyed, you've just got some big names. Have you found that's kind of like gradually sort of developed? Did you start off with like someone kind of well-known and then that got you going? Or how did that?
I think Lou Elizondo helped a great deal. He was, what was that, a couple of years ago? the first interview with him helped, I think, because I was able to say, hey, I'm inviting you to the PiFi show. I've had guests such as Louis Elizondo, Kurt John Mungle, Bernardo Castro. Those three seem to help. I think part of it's just luck. Part of it is, I think, what's that?
Persistence, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I have probably 50 emails with Gary Nolan. So it's just squeak. And I have probably 100 with Denise, Tim Burchett's assistant. She does his scheduling of meetings. So it's just like a daily thing. But I'm still trying to get bigger and better guests. And I have this little thing on the website, on the PiFiShow.com. It's like a most wanted little poster. I'd really love to get Sabine Hassenfelder. She's one of my favorite physicists. And she basically just was honest and upfront, said that she was really busy. But anyway, I didn't want to turn this into, about me or the show. I appreciate you saying that. But if you have any, I know you and I've talked about some ideas, and I won't mention any names. Hopefully we can work that guest out. We'll tease a little bit. Definitely. We'll do a little bit of, I know some information, but I can't tell you.
I think it'll help when he's here. He's coming here in March, so it's sort of easier to ask someone when they're hanging out at your house and just versus on the phone.
That's
might this have anything to do with our last show?
Did it have anything to do with the last show? Maybe. It's not Stephen. He's not coming back. I don't think I can get him back, but
I have an idea.
Stephen actually told me he would come back. I sent a message to him after that show because I thought we did. I thought that was a really good conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I actually, I've called him a couple of times and we'll have a great chat. I mean, I'll be so grateful for 10, 15 minutes because I still see him, he's kind of, I'm impressed with the work that he's done and the name he's made for himself. And yes, he's a little overly skeptical for my liking, but I want to see both sides. I want to hear both sides to find my middle, and we'll just chat. And we'll talk about film. We'll talk about UEP. We'll talk about sort of religion, faith, life, death, fear, hope, doubt, dreams, all of that stuff, and it always seems to end up back to this place of disappointment that we both felt at the same time when this whole 2017 to 2021 where we were believers, it kind of fizzled away with more and more kind of facts or more cases debunked. To be honest, there's a lot of people out there that because of Mick West debunking, they are starting to be a lot more skeptical about it all. I don't know where you guys stand at this point, but yeah,
I have always been more skeptical of humans than non-human intelligence. You know what I mean? We were Alexei and I were talking about this a little bit before the show. I think people get the idea that I'm skeptic. I'm not a skeptic about life in the universe. I'm skeptical of humans and their motives. And some people, the teasing is another thing. I meant to bring that up. Maybe you can help me with my OCD on, like, when someone like Ross Coulthart says he knows the location of a spaceship and he won't divulge it. I think that's kind of silly. You know what I mean? I think that kind of information where you're just teasing for, what is it, public clout, platform clout, or what is the psychology behind that? I mean,
yeah, I mean, typically it's that, right? And we'd like to think that it's because he really wants to protect his source, and there's that, confidentiality piece. But okay, then why share it? Then what's the motive?
Yeah.
The motive is maybe, if we want to, sort of err on his side, we might say he's trying to get the message out there. He's trying to, keep the momentum towards disclosure going. And then it helps to know that, okay, there is this real information. We don't know it now, and it's really frustrating, but it's there. That could be a bit of, or it's self-interest. I think it's probably a combination of all. He wants to.
The one thing I try to get people to understand about me is I only have faith in one thing, right? I will never have faith in a human. I don't think we were created. I don't think humans were created with the clout to be, or with the ability to have faith in them, because we're all flawed in one way or the other, right? So when someone says, "Just trust me, bro," it's like, why are you asking me to have faith in what you're saying? And that's kind of that's one of my, I guess it's really part
that sounds
of my
like more of an existential threat to me.
No,
I know it's sort of leaning towards that.
I don't see it that way. I see it as, I don't see any need to have faith in any human. I don't think humans are able to follow through with the promise of faith. Like if you said, "Follow me," if you were Jim Jones, I would have been the last guy to follow Jim Jones to Guyana. Okay. You wouldn't have seen me getting on a plane to go to Guyana to follow Jim Jones, because I don't put my faith in people.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we all
it's
should
just
be
quite
that.
an extreme comment to say, I don't have faith in people.
Well, I think faith is
it's
very
just
strong. I reserve faith for my spiritual side, right? I will never place a human at that level of a spiritual level. There's no human created, because I believe all humans were created by the Creator, and that entity is what you put your faith in. Not.
Well, okay, just real quick. I'm going on an airplane flight in about a week. Am I not putting my faith into the pilot when they're flying me?
No, you think this is why. I'm very careful with my words. I think about things. I don't believe them. I don't believe in UFOs. I think they exist. Right? If I say I think something exists, that means in my mind there's enough evidence for me to agree with it. But I don't believe in them. I'm not going to
help clarify it. Yeah.
Oh, hey, I'm not going to bow down to the aliens when they come. You see, if they ask me to, they're in big trouble. So I think I don't know why, and maybe this is something you can help me with, Dan. I don't mean to, and I'm really not making light of the whole, therapy thing. I really am not. I like you, and one of the reasons I bring you on the show is so maybe I can learn. I hope to learn something. And your questions make me think.
And you guys froze for a second. I'm gonna see if I'm gonna switch to a different Wi-Fi here, because I think you froze for a bit. Am I freezing?
Not now. So see, MD says, but faith starts off blind and can build from there.
I'm going to connect it to my phone.
Uh-oh. But MD, as far as your comment goes, I mean, it does start off blind.
Is that
I think
better?
what we have. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you there? Hear you. Oh, great.
Yep, I'm here.
I was addressing several comments in the chat where there was the comment about that faith starts off blind, and it does. But again, I don't think, Alexei has a right to make his policies on faith. Dan, you have a right to make your policies on faith. I have a right to make my own policies on faith. This is, I'm a huge believer in free will. Okay. I don't follow this scientific trend that there is no free will that some people seem to follow. So I believe, I don't know. That's crazy. I didn't think that this would be a discussion about that, but it seems to be like a key a key thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's linked, and or at least it's almost like a foundation for a later discussion or wherever this leads, because I don't know, a lot of belief. I mean, belief is faith, and faith is based on usually data, should be, but it's based on needs. It's based on fears. It's based on interactions that we have, conversations that we have. Hi there.
Hey, Dan. This is Patrick. Thank you, T-Car. I meant to recognize you last time. I really appreciate that. I really do. But you don't have to. You don't have to do that. I really appreciate it. It's Christmas time, and I want people to spend spend money. I really appreciate it, though. Thank you very much. By the way, that money is going to go towards Toys for Tiny Tots, or Toys for Tiny Artisans, which donates to Toys for Tiny Tots. We have a thing we do each year where we collect toys, and then they're artisan-oriented toys, they're construction and engineering and architecture-oriented toys, and we give them to either Toys for Tiny Tots or the Marines Forgotten Child Fund or something like that. So thank you. Sorry for the interruption. I forgot to thank T-Car last time. Are you with us, Patrick? I had invited Patrick when I didn't know Alexei was coming. So we have a full house. So someone
All right, I was just noticing some chat, some questions.
You're roboting just a little bit, Dan.
Oh, I am.
Oh, so what we're talking about, Patrick, is we were talking about a lot of things, but somehow we got off on, which is a cool discussion about faith. I was saying that I don't put faith in any human. We were talking about belief in the whole UAP thing, UFO, non-human intelligence or whatever, and so it kind of got into the spiritual belief conversation. And someone asked me if I believed in God, and yes, I was raised in the church. I do believe in God. To be thoughtful of the viewers, I use the term creator. Okay. I do believe in God, who I think is the creator of the universe. So that answers that question. And that's related to why I don't have faith in any person, any human. I only have faith. This conversation started off when I said I only have faith in one thing. I don't have faith in any humans. So we were talking about these promises, this teasing, Patrick, where Ross Coulthart or some people will say, I know where the location of this huge. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan.
Oh,
sorry, Dan. I just I was trying to fill Patrick in where we were talking about this teasing type attitude where you have Ross saying he knows where the location of a huge UFO is, but he can't share it, and I don't understand. I don't. It's not that it bothers me. I just don't appreciate it because I feel like it's kind of fishing for notoriety, and then I think you mentioned, Dan, that maybe I should, maybe not, maybe it wasn't you, but that's how we got into the whole faith thing, Patrick. Should I have faith in Ross? And I said no. I shouldn't be asked to have faith in Ross. Right? Ross should just either not disclose the information that he has, or if he's going to mention it, he should go ahead and disclose it. And this is my issue with this whole whistleblower aspect. We don't really have any whistleblowers yet. No one has actually come forward and given any whistleblower, qualified information to date. So,
well, Art, one thing you asked is, so what does that actually do? It seems like to me it keeps people's attention. And so what would be the goal? What would be the point of keeping people's attention? Well, legislation takes years to happen. And so you need to keep people's attention somehow. And you're competing against like mainstream media and TikTok and TV shows. So
I think you can do that with your personality and with actual information you can share, right? You can create content that keeps people interested without teasing them with information. That's my belief.
Yeah, he did that with the David Grush interview. So he had already established that. Maybe he just felt like, I mean, and then he's in the limelight. You know, it's hard not to try to keep new information coming out after such a big story. I mean, I'm a psychologist, so I'm more, I have a tendency of siding with the person and making excuses for them or assuming, the best intentions kind of thing. But
I'm not, this is not about whether Ross is telling the truth or not. It's about people expecting me to follow, to just blindly believe when they shouldn't be asking me to blindly believe. And you know what I mean? It's not, it's a two-sided coin. Ross can say whatever he wants and I don't have to believe him, but I'm not criticizing Ross for what he's saying. I'm just saying, I don't like it. I'm not criticizing him. I can say I don't like something without criticizing somebody. I hope I can. If I can't, I'm in the wrong place, I guess, in time. But what about you, Patrick? You're very quiet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of things. I don't know. I have one friend who says this could be conspiracy related, or not conspiracy. It could be a cover up. Like a lot of times when Congress holds meetings, or when we get something that's close to whistleblowing, that's being covered by the media, a lot of times something else important is happening at the same time. But that could also be coincidental. Like it's really hard to know how to approach those kind of things and where to put your confidence in sources like this.
This person's asking me why I have faith in God or the Creator, as you call it. Well, I have to admit I was raised in the church, but I had a true spiritual experience when I was 12, which, and so I don't know how to answer that question except that, you're free to believe in your, have your faith. I don't really criticize anybody's faith or their religion or their thoughts. If you're a Satanist, more power to you. If you're an atheist, cool. I'm a live and let live kind of guy, But at the same time, we can talk about why, we can talk about motive. And I think when you put yourself out there, when Ross puts himself out there and other people put themselves out there, I can probably go find 5 or 6 examples on Twitter right now where people are saying, I have information, I just can't share it. I'm sorry, I just can't share it. Like, what? I don't know.
Well, I bet everyone in this screen right now has been in that situation where we've said that, like we have information that I can't tell you. There's something I want to tell you, but I can't. Not once.
I mean, if somebody can find it, let me know. If somebody can find it, because I mean, I've got like 3,500 videos on YouTube, and you'll never you won't.
Well, maybe not on YouTube.
Them.
I mean, in your life, in your personal life, sometime in your life, it's like there's something I want to tell you, but I probably shouldn't. And it usually is a preface to telling someone that thing, but it's sort of communicating this is going to be hard, and I want to be confidential. I want to be confidential.
I truly don't. It just goes to my core. I truly don't believe that humans should put faith in biological entities.
I love how you're connecting these two things. Like this to I'm not going to have faith. People should have faith in other people. That's a big.
So it could be like it's not so much that we trust the humans, we trust the process. So I trust the scientific method because that's the thing that leads us closest to the truth. I'm just trying to think of like how that applies here though. Like here it's so like it's really hard to get a good application. I mean, you can do Bayesian reasoning or just like looking at it statistically, like how people and these professions all agree on this concept, how many people in these and like agree on what's happening based on the little bits that have been said by Congress and people that are in the know here, and like how much in a way your confidence based on those quote unquote experts and like other experts over here. Yeah, I don't know.
That's generally how I decide on things, you know, just using Bayesian reasoning and that sort of statistical process. Someone asked me the other day, is like, I think they asked me, is sort of Christianity a cult? And we were watching all these cult documentaries online, and I'm really into them. I don't know if you guys have seen The Vow, or there's just a lot of cult documentaries. They're fascinating. And Christianity is not a cult because you can leave, right? And there's it's very large. I mean, this third of the world, I think, is Christian. So is size a factor? But there are people that do believe. I mean, if you think of, you know, the Catholic Church, is that more cultish than Protestant?
I think a lot of people have a basic belief in a creator, but they're not cultish, right? I think a lot of people have this intuition that tells them there's something bigger than them. You know, that something as vast as the universe, or something as magical as the earth. You know, with our perfect zone for creating life. And I know now that we have many planets out there like Earth, which I think is great, and that's why I think Creator created life in the entire universe. So
I think it's a human proclivity and something that's, you know, almost evolutionarily evolved for us to sort of cope with the fear of death, to have a religion. So I think there's something in everyone that looks for that or needs that, and that some don't go down that path. But
yeah. Oh, and I don't proselytize either. I would never dare try to convert someone to Christianity or preach to anybody. That's something that's like totally against my belief, you know, because I feel like it's such a personal decision. And that I some of the churches I used to visit when I was younger were like that. You would go to that church and you felt the pressure that you had to, you know, you felt the pressure. And I didn't feel that pressure when I had my experience. It wasn't even a special night at church. There was nothing special about that night at church. There was no homecoming or no, you know, whatever we Baptists used to call those nights when when the preacher was supposed to get extra fired up. As a matter of fact, we had some of the most progressive preachers at our church. We actually almost got kicked out of the Southern Baptist Convention because we had a lady who was an assistant pastor, and that was a no-no in the Southern Baptist Convention. So I grew up kind of in a very progressive Baptist church. But anyway, enough about my religion. We're here to talk about, I think it does kind of go to that whole thing of faith, though, because if I'm gonna put my trust, let's use the word trust. I think there's like hierarchies of. Thankfully, there's a hierarchy in the English language for me, anyway. And so I put faith up here, and then trust is right below faith, right? So I may put my trust in some people, but those people have earned that trust, right? And if Ross Coulthart wants to, you know, share more information, I'm not sure that he's actually shared it. Has he actually shared any information? If he wants to share some information, that would help me gain some trust in him. Or anybody like, I'm not picking on Ross. It's just the only person.
Who do you trust in the UFO world?
Who do I trust in the UFO world? I'm sad to say I can't think of anybody, as far as because the main reason is because I don't think anybody has the full picture. I don't think anybody knows completely. Even the people who, I think it's part of the job of our intelligence community to present that they have knowledge. That's part of their shtick, right? The intelligence community wants other countries to think that they have all the answers. You know, they hold the secrets, but I don't think they do. I don't think any human knows the truth. I don't think the truth is obtainable by humans. I think it's it's part of my whole spiritual belief thing.
I think
So
when it comes
Alexei,
to any organism, their truth depends directly on their level of evolution. And so we might have a grander truth, but it's not like the truth of creation. I don't think, like you were saying, Artisan, I don't think a physical species will ever like truly understand all of creation.
Yeah.
You know, but we'll have the best of our ability based off of our senses in our evolved state.
We talked about this in a little bit in the last show, where I have this belief that I think there's a firewall that we humans were created with a firewall, and that firewall prevents us from having certain, like the overall knowledge of the universe. Like we may not ever discover what dark matter is or dark energy. We just, that may just be something we're not supposed to know about. You know?
Well, there could be another sense that's just equivalent to, like, say we only had sound and our entire universal understanding was based off sounds. Then we gained eyes, and so now we can see to the edge of the universe. Now imagine there's another sense that's a step bigger, right? So we would be able to see 10 times more. Now another sense, and that the ability to gain senses through evolution probably continues indefinitely.
Right. So the way I think about that personally with the sense thing, that's really interesting. It would be harder to do that than to take the route of like symbolism and metaphor and comprehension, and how we can expand our ability to understand concepts via symbol manipulation and metaphor. But that's really interesting. So, I mean, what I would assume would be like addition of new physical matter in the brain that would be necessary for new sense organs to take place. Like, say,
exactly,
if we were to like, we could maybe at some point in the future. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said an organ, exactly. Like we have ears, we have eyes.
Well, we could just develop the ability to use more of a percentage of our brain than 15%, right?
Right. Well, to do something
what is the percentage? Is it 15 or 20%?
Well, I mean that to look at that, that's also there's a lot of misconceptions around that. Like, we're always using 100% of our brain. It's like what part of us and what part of me is accessing how much of my brain at one time. That's really hard to say. Like, we just kind of throw percentages out that sound good.
I would agree, Patrick, that you're probably using 100% of your brain, but some people I don't think are.
Yeah, well,
no,
I
but
mean,
it's an important distinction.
It's
misused or misreferenced all the time. You know, where every neurotransmitter is working at most of the time.
But I mean, different parts of the brain have different functions, right?
That's right.
So
if you were to, like, or you could like add in the future, say like we were trying to add dolphin sonar projection. That would require like the addition of new possible like nasal cavities or like ways to manipulate the human nose to make noises, in addition to like their like sonar dish kind of situation that they have going on there, which is literally like a full new organ that you could call it like that. Yeah. What I think is going to happen more likely for us to come to understanding and understanding the universe and like the possibility of there being aliens, even if we don't actually encounter them, would be had through AI. More than likely, the education process is just going to become very refined. Like we're going to be able to understand the universe very quickly because AI will be able to translate mathematics and the physics of the universe into really rich grand metaphors, which is what I'm hoping for, because I'm really bad at math. I'm really bad at physics, but I'm really interested in understanding the possibilities of things and likelihoods, as well as just like expanding my own human umwelt.
So tell me more about that. So you're basically referencing the use of metaphors to explain very complex, theories, and that
right.
That would work for you.
Yeah. That when we look at most science books and even heavy chemistry books, I think like some of the richest detail is found in when they like at the end of a paragraph, when they like really conclude things very well in a compact metaphor. It's like, well, I should be able to give an example here. Let's see. I mean, we talk about like water, like fluid dynamics. We use like water metaphors. We say like it's like transferring a cup in a bathtub or something. So that's not really the best metaphor. That's like a physical example, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's kind of like how our species has been understanding for very long times through the manipulation of language.
If my
So
power goes,
I'd love to get a, I'm sorry I'm not running this, but I'm really curious about where everyone's belief is in regards to alien life has visited Earth. The four of us, where do we stand right now?
I'll start, and because I'm going to say if my power goes off, don't go anywhere. I'll be back. Because we're having the storm that caused the tornadoes in Middle Tennessee is coming through right now.
Oh, you're having that storm too? Yeah, it's rough
coming.
too. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're just 10 miles away from me, Patrick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's coming.
It's quieter now, but yeah.
I'm sorry. I was trying to give a public service announcement. Now it's calming down. What was the question again? Oh, do we? Yeah, I think so. Probably even in our ancient past. See, that's the thing. I'm not skeptical about life in the universe. I'm just skeptical about humans because we're flawed. We were created with flaws, or we were created with limitations. Maybe I should say that, not flawed.
And why are you saying that? Connect that with the question.
Because I don't think like I was talking about with the firewall. I don't think that we will ever totally understand all of the beings in the universe and what their activities have been and their history and our history.
So, do you think that we can like transcend that firewall in some area, like maybe the whole thing, but like we can make big steps around that, perhaps with the AI example and like metaphors, where like the AI can be like, it's like this for the alien to experience its world, and give like 1,000 examples like that until we really start to get a picture of how we comprehend it.
I'll give you the same disclaimer that ChatGPT gives me every day, and it says, I'm just a large language model. And the information you're receiving is based on the training, the machine learning I've had. Right. So I'm not, again, I mean, I understand the whole fear around AI. I don't fear it. I love it because it helps. Literally, I use it daily to help me understand things that I don't have to. I can ask questions without things I used to think were dumb questions. I can ask ChatGPT and get answers without the embarrassment of me. You know what I mean? Asking one of my friends or you guys, or I think it's great, and I don't fear it, and I look forward to it helping humans. But I think it's still going to have its own limitations. I don't think it can surpass the firewall because the firewall is probably one of the laws of nature. Right. I think.
Yeah, I just mean like it would help us get closer and closer to understanding, like in the way that it could best, like theoretically in the future, best serve humans. It's already massively doing that for myself. Like my opinions and my nuance is becoming much greater because I'm able to learn science from multiple angles and learn about the human condition from like history and philosophy and all these fields. But
all right, so we got a yes from Tony that aliens have visited planet Earth. Alexei,
you want a simple yes or no?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. We can start there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't give simple answers. I have to get more complex.
we're just laying the groundwork here, the baseline.
Word. Yeah, I think I think they may have, my opinions on this have shifted a lot, but yeah, it's really hard to say. The Fermi paradox is, so this is all I'll say about this. I don't want to go into anything, but like Fermi paradox is really strong. The many layers that a species has to go through for it to develop life, or it would suggest that aliens are very, very far away. But again, their technology, we don't know how technology will be. It could transcend a lot of those limitations, and so they could be here. And a lot of my opinions have shifted towards believing that they very likely have been here, or something big is being covered up that is probably not terrestrial of this Earth.
I mean, if you can grasp infinity, and you say, even if they had evolved to a point where they could use wormholes to travel to different places in infinity, we could still not have ever had contact with them, but they still could have existed, right? Just because the Fermi paradox, I think, is a little limiting in that it assumes that, right? The question is, where are the aliens?
Yeah. Do you think it's like human centric?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Fermi paradox does not include other dimensions.
I mean,
Right.
when you think of infinity, I mean, there are whole zones of infinity we can't possibly ever discover, right?
Right.
So
There could be
I've been
whole civilizations out there on the other side of infinity. You know,
the thing I've been thinking a lot about, and my thoughts do go to those kind of areas about different dimensions and wormholes, and all the different ways they could get here or not get here. But it comes down to, for me, the millions of people, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people that have had an experience. Some have seen things that they just, really are convinced that it's not terrestrial, or it's something out of this world. And then there's people who've had real experiences, like from abductions to visitations, and to, I mean, I saw it was the name of the logger who was abducted, forestry.
Travis Walton.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw
Travis.
Travis Walton. I'm like,
Right.
hearing that guy. I mean, it's
Yeah,
really
that was one of the things that kind of like shifted my thinking as well. Is just so many personal anecdote, or it's like Huberman talks about like anecdotal data. I mean, they are anecdotal stories, but those add up, and there's like hundreds. There are hundreds of these stories. Many of them confirmed by other people that like clearly don't seem to be, they don't seem to be seeking attention. At least like very genuine.
Yeah, exactly. And
this is kind of where I get in trouble, though. Where I mean, I don't criticize other people, or I don't say I don't believe them. I just don't use personal experiences as evidence.
because you haven't had one yet.
Well, I actually have, but I haven't talked about it.
You've
much
been abducted?
No, I haven't been abducted. Never claimed that. But
Yeah.
I don't expect people to believe my story, so I don't talk about it much.
Totally. Yeah, that's
but I don't consider it evidence, right? If I had gathered some sort of physical evidence or some great video that, of course, that was in 1972, so we didn't have decent video cameras back then. But I mean, that's the reason I do believe in life in the universe, because of my little experience. But I don't expect other people to have faith in me about that. I don't expect people to even believe me, because I don't want them, criticizing me for not believing, or putting faith in them, or using their experience as evidence, right? I think we have to. I think we have to have I think we have to maintain a high standard. The higher the standard of evidence we maintain, the quicker we will get disclosure. That's my belief. If we all just say, okay, I believe you, government, then it's going to go away. We've seen this before. I have this little thing I've created, this little roller coaster of the 60s, the 80s, the 2000s, where this has happened over and over again, and every time it kind of goes back to sleep, because people just say, oh, okay, I believe you. I believe what you say. And it becomes a fact of life. And we're still there. We're still here. We're still asking. I keep meaning to bring this stinking magazine I've got. It's a UFO magazine. It has almost the exact same headlines in like 1978 as today. Congressional hearings, Air Force pilots seeing things. You could change the date on it, and it would be today's headlines. So I think it's my experience that leads me to where I am today.
Well, did you know there's actually a UFO crash retrieval program? There is actually one, but it's not to retrieve spaceships. It's to retrieve drones that fall, other planes that crash from other countries. There's actually, somewhere in the military that goes around and collects these things. And my only kind of question or concern is like, is that what someone saw? I mean, I'm going on the more skeptical side, but.
Well, and they don't use the term UFO either, right? They use the term UAP or whatever.
Okay, UAP, right? Crash retrieval.
I'm not being picky. I'm just saying.
Yeah, totally.
It could be that certain government programs have been manipulated in media, on social media platforms, to
But is that what David Grush read or heard about? Was he heard about a UAP crash retrieval because there is a UAP crash retrieval? There's a retrieval program to retrieve unidentified aerial phenomenon that crash. They're not ours. We don't know what they are, but we're going to retrieve them. And they're drones. They're things from other countries. They're planes. That's what I was kind of hearing on was a Michael Shermer show. This guy who wrote
takes
this
it a
book
step further and says we've recovered biologics.
said that too. Yeah. So I know.
Again, these are things that people have told him. He hasn't seen it firsthand. So
yeah,
I think he's a good guy. I think he served his country. The thing is, he was an intel guy. I don't know. This is where my conspiracy mindset.
What does that mean? Tell me. What do you mean?
Well, most of the people that are involved with this have an intelligence background. Lil Zondo, David Grush. Just today, Christopher Mellon made the statement, and I was really taken aback by it. And I'll find it in just a minute. He literally was one of the people that pushed this story from the beginning, right? Today, in the middle of a sentence, he said, and if this turns out to be true, comma, and went on to say, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, are we now backing up? Are we in reverse now? Or have we completed the Intel Commission mission, and now are we backing up? Are we toning it down? Are we setting people? Are we turning people? Conditioning them to go back to sleep for another 20 years? I think we are.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like the pressure is pretty hard now. Like, I don't think that people have put this much pressure on Congress in history. I see what you're talking about, Tony, and there have been lots of ways lots of waves, intergenerationally that tend to happen like this as well, outside of media coverage and within. But I do think that people are really pushing harder now than they have in the past.
But it hasn't done much good, though, right? Because
we kind of talked about that.
I actually lost friends over this. Like Lou Jimenez was a guy I've lost contact with, and he won't even come on the show anymore because when he started the Big Phone Home, he said I wasn't supporting it because I said not to expect anything out of government. Right? This was 2 years ago, and it was just a simple opinion that I had because of my history with different people and knowing that their whole job is they're the holder of secrets. That's their complete job. That is their only job in government is to keep secrets and to create this atmosphere around secrets, to create a mystique, around them. And so anyway, I'll get myself in trouble again. But
well, these conversations are important then, keeping these messages out there and keeping people interested.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to ask yourself, even there are people now who are even questioning the gimbal videos, right? I mean, like higher ups that are questioning them, right? So you have to wonder why these were, first of all, why they were released. If you go back to 2017 and replay the whole thing over again, what did MD say? It would take time to practice, but anyone can seek the answers through internal meditation. Okay. So anyway, I don't mean to dominate the show. You're the guest, Dan.
No. I mean, I got lots of thoughts and questions. I mean, I like what we're talking about. I mean, maybe it's my psychological background and working with people every day, but I just, all these people have had these experiences, and could it all be sleep paralysis? I mean, I don't think so. There's not enough talk about that. I mean, when you're in that sort of dream state, a lot of those dreams are, kind of what these folks are reporting. I just don't think it explains it all because there's corroborating evidence. And I just do believe that eyewitness testimony is evidence. It's not always good evidence, but it's evidence, especially the more you get it, the better the evidence is.
I got a story. When I was interviewing Lou Elizondo, I talked about Sequoia Nuclear Plant. That was just, you know where it is now, don't you, Patrick? It's not too far.
Where?
It's not too far from you now. It's just down the mountain from the mountain where I live.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And I was just kind of kiddingly saying, hey, you know, do you know anything about this? You know, we're near Oak Ridge, Tennessee. You know, everybody knows, hopefully knows about Oak Ridge.
Right.
And, you know, I have this, and Lou was like, yeah, that, well, I have to go back. This is not a quote. That area seems to be pretty active. And then we moved, and then the conversation moved on. Well, when I was a teenager, we used to go camping at this place called Pinky's Point. And it was a peninsula that came out across the river from the nuclear plant. And we would sit, and sometimes we would see things in the sky above the nuclear plant. Okay, there's a story. Okay, I admit it. I got lots of stories like that. But what does that do for you? What does it do for anybody? You know, I was out there camping with a bunch of potheads. I didn't smoke pot. I'm known in my camping group for the only one not smoking pot. and so I was in right mind. You know, I saw what I saw. I've never actually told that story. You know why? Because I don't expect anybody to believe me. And I don't see the reason to tell it if I don't expect someone to believe something. If I say something, I want to say it with authority, and I want people to believe me, right?
Right.
So I don't tell all the stories that all of my experiences that I've had.
Wow, Tony, that's really interesting, man. When I was camping as a scout, I also had a story where I experienced a group hallucination. With so at the end of summer camp, we had a large bonfire, and they would do they would just tell stories, and they had the ranger do skits with people and stuff. So we were all sitting around in kind of rows, you know, kind of like bleachers, but they were just dug out into the ground. And across or behind the fire was a lake, and then across from the lake was the cafeteria or mess hall. And so somebody next to me said they could see a light reflecting, or they could see the lights on in the reflection of the mess hall in the lake, and they were off in real life. And they were like, "Can you see that?" And I was like, "Wow, I do see that." And I still remember vividly seeing that. And then I heard people down the line asking each other, like, "Can you see that?" And we were like, "Yeah, we all see this ghostly apparition here." It's very very strange. And that adds nuance to the story again with the UAPs, because a lot of these stories could be very valid and they could be very vivid. Like I'm still able to retell that story 20 years later, still very vivid in my mind, because we communicate through these stories through salient metaphors or salient symbols and those kind of things, or just salient experiences that we all they're like reinforced in their salience through our experience and shared experience, through the fact that we all can confirm, or at least verify visually, even if we're all hallucinating the same thing, we're still confirming that in a very empirical way in that way. And so that there's a lot of that could be at play with the way that these stories have similarities. But it's again, I'm so drawn to the genuine aspect of it. They're like so many people, I've never heard of them before. Like the only time I ever hear about them is when they're telling the story. But again, that works the other way around. Like the only reason that I'm hearing about them is because they were seeking that fame for that story and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and see, I don't want to. That's the other thing, is I have this thing where I don't like people teasing information or teasing. So I don't talk about my experiences because I don't want to have a double standard. Right? I don't want to be that guy out there doing it and then criticize someone else for doing it. So I mean, I have a bunch of stories like that. I mean, we used to backpack the Appalachian Trail. We were backpacking every weekend, and we were always seeing stuff. I mean, just constantly. But what was it? Well, I don't know what it was. Can't tell you what it was. It's unidentified. You know, I can tell you this: they weren't helicopters or planes. Might have been. I don't know. See, you just go down a rabbit hole, and nobody. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Going to the theme of catastrophic disclosure, Do you guys think that it would be catastrophic? How do you think people would respond? Because I'm more I'm more leaning towards that people would, handle it ultimately just fine. That they get on with their day. They play with their kids. They're with their wives. They're with their families. There certainly would be some shock involved. I know there was some shock involved when I saw those videos in 2017, and I was told that UFOs are real, and kind of, bought that hook, line, and sinker, thinking, oh, aliens are real. But I saw the gimbal video the other day again. Actually, I hadn't seen it in about a year, and I was like, all right, I know it's glare. Like, I know all the arguments. I've seen them all. But shit, that really does kind of look like a flying saucer. That doesn't really look like a plane.
We just don't know if the military has certain high tech. That's the other option, right? That these things seem to tend to show up in training areas. So that makes me a little suspicious. Yeah. And the military has been known to. I said this one time in one show. I said this. The military has been known to experiment on its own people, and they were like, no. And I went and grabbed the video where the soldiers are walking towards the nuclear, explosion right after it. And it's literally still in process, and they get out of trenches and start walking towards it. And so yeah, the military has done things to experiment with its men before.
So Tony, let me ask you a question. Let's say aliens flew down tomorrow. What would and introduce themselves and did all that? How would that change your world, your faith, your religion, your community's faith?
It wouldn't. I meant to mention this earlier, that when you were asking the question, I think that it's going to vary. It's going to be like, it'll vary with certain people. Like the people who haven't sort of had any experience at all, and they sort of write this whole thing off their whole life. I think it may be a shock to them, but I think to maybe 25% of the people, it wouldn't be like something they would go empty their bank accounts over. But I think some people would, and I think that's what they're afraid. I think there's a legitimate concern that some people would, start selling off stock. I mean, you know what I mean? You could crash the market pretty easily because it's volatile. So I mean, I understand the concerns, and I understand the drip mentality.
Because it's very different seeing a video of something that looks like extraterrestrial than actual contact that's worldwide.
Yeah, because I've never seen a video that frightened me, but I have seen things in real life that frightened me.
Mm-hmm.
We had a case one time. It was a scout trip, and we had all the scouts in their tents, and the scoutmasters were around the fire, and we were just sitting there, and this sort of black thing went over the fire and went between us, and we're all sitting there going, okay, that was some little cloud. That was some little thing. And then we were all like really quiet.
Because it'll all come down like
everybody was just kind of frozen. Those type of things you see in real life are, frightening.
Because I think it'll all come down to threat. Like it's all, if it's a threat, then people will freak out. I think that's what it all comes down to. Threat is linked to fear. Fear is linked to uncertainty. Uncertainty is linked to mortality. Go ahead, Alexei.
It slipped my mind at this point. Well, I was going to say, I think it depends on the individual quite a bit, because nothing that has come from this disclosure movement has impressed me or shocked me in any way. We were talking about like encounters or why we believe extraterrestrials. Well, like, there's nothing that will convince me otherwise, unless like Artisan was saying, maybe it was some type of project but it would have to have been going on for over 35, 40 years and targeting individuals. So like a very, very focused MK Ultra type of thing. But I find that harder to believe than the concept of interdimensional type beings.
Yeah.
Patrick, where are you on this?
So not to go into too much detail, I have like three categories that I kind of examined this on over the last year or so. So there is the fear, and Verbeke gets into this a bit, of like the meaning crisis, and existential crises. So people tend to go through these in one way or another when they begin to consider their place in the world and their place in the universe and existence. And so when we are introduced to the idea that we're not, well, it can very much counteract the glorification of the human and the idea that we are special and that kind of thing. And people take that in different degrees. Like some people don't care about existential crises at all. Some people are fine pursuing different ways of thinking and that kind of thing. So you can weigh that how you will. I kind of think that it's just going to cause radical change. But that's one, and there's like the idea that one that's a little bit more solid, I think, of an idea, more empirical, is intergenerational adaptation, I guess you could call it. So it's like it might be a shock to this generation, but like once that's passed and it's already become mainstream and knowledge, the next generation is going to grow up with that. Like to us, it's still like the cell phone phenomenon. Like we are shocked to see how quickly young teenagers can type and can adapt to technology. Our older generation are very like there's a separation there. And so that could be like a very vast separation. Like it may not be a good thing. I'm sure that we will adapt in one way or another. And most of the species is not going to be thrown amok, as the term is. But I think that it's going to make radical change in one way or another, though. And another thing to consider is that this is already kind of happening now, or examples of like how this is proceeding can be seen from the Vatican and from the Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama has already acknowledged the idea that this is not really going to impact Buddhism. If aliens exist, that doesn't reduce or amplify our place in the universe, which you would kind of expect from Buddhism, a very acceptance-based practice. You know, the Pope said it's not going to influence the Catholic Church, and essentially that's radically summing up a very good speech that he made on the idea. But apparently the voice of the Catholic Church, if you will, has made it known that this is not, or he's going to at least like try to balance this out in a very wise way, which brings me.
Yeah, and not to minimize, those are really three things I've been thinking about too, and I'm really pleased you brought them up. But I'd be surprised if the Pope would say, "Hey, we're screwed," you know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's in their best interest to say, you know, we're gonna make this work. They got a lot riding on it.
But it does defy Genesis. It does defy creationism. Like the very first few chapters of the Bible, it goes directly counter to the idea of direct creationism, or however you want to call that. It kind of defies that, and we tend to brush over that because we're looking for that union. But we do have to remember that there are verses of the Bible that we must turn a blind eye to. Like I try to be very careful with how I interpret different faiths and what I draw from them. But yeah, I mean, I have to ignore the part where Jesus said, "Do as I do, and you will be able to handle poisonous snakes," and I have to ignore the part where that's transferred it over to the church in Georgia, where they weekly will drink snake poison and all those kind of behaviors. So yeah, we're gonna have to rethink Genesis. I think that's going to be a big one. But other than that, I mean, I see a positive, progressive attitude being taken from most of the world's faiths in this regard.
I got struck by lightning. I missed the Bible part.
Oh, no, yeah, it's really coming down now.
I mean, I'll be honest, and I think I mentioned it on the first time I came on your show, but when I discovered all this 2017 New York Times article, I was a really kind of believing Christian, and it was a part of my life. And 6 months later, it sort of wasn't. And I haven't really told many people. I mean, I have Christian friends that I kind of say, yeah, I'm still, walking in my faith, but it did affect it. And I'm finding it hard to conceptualize both. And I don't know why, because of course, God created many, earths, and it doesn't make sense that it would be just us, right? I mean, there's philosophically, I should be able to just, or logically make it align. But for some reason, it's screwed it all up for me.
I think we'll get to realize
the aspect of the whole phenomenon somewhat still relate to the religion. If you could say angels are on a realm in a dimension above us, they have somewhat thoughts that control our dimensional realm, and then Jinn, demon, tulpa exist within inner realms. To me, the dimensional, that's why for me it's very interdimensional, but not because I'm religious, but because that's where my scientific understanding took me, was to it's an interdimensional aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
You can
everybody
do a lot with
doesn't disagree though with Christianity, right? Because or Catholic, I forget which one you said, but like basically where you could have different layers of beings. Somewhat like we were talking about the other day with a hierarchy. Artists mentioned the hierarchy of beings, you could say.
Yeah, I'm very wary of that. The animism and the beliefs underlying animism and various faiths in the East, like the idea of us being greater than or less than different creatures, that can be very deceiving and lead us to glorification of the human, or elan vital, like the vital of human life. I mean, but you can do a lot with the idea of dimensions. Like you can grant a lot of power with what how you use dimensions, you could say. I wish I knew more. I'm still trying to study astrophysics and get my head around thinking that way. But what was I gonna say? Like, I think the Genesis is still going to be compromised. Like, I think that's still going to be a problem with creationism, because we have the verse about man being made in God's image, and when we start to see aliens that are very unlike us and that are better than us in every way that we could define the word better, you're going to see
I think we have to remember that the Bible was inspired, but man still wrote it, right?
Yeah, so that'll be
Jesus didn't write the Bible, so there's a slight possibility that he was misquoted.
Right.
I look at the Bible as I don't know, this is heresy in the Baptist Church, but I look at it as a book of philosophy. And I think as a Christian, you only really need one verse out of the Bible to be a Christian. That's John 3:16. So I don't, you know what I mean? People who nitpick, I'm not saying you are. I'm saying there are certain people who their whole life is about nitpicking the Bible.
Right.
But it wasn't written in English, right? It was written in Hebrew and some Greek, right? I guess the New Testament was Greek and the Old Testament Hebrew. But right, so you're talking about translations and human beings writing, and then you got the whole Catholic Church manipulation. And anyway, I'm certainly not casting judgment on the Bible. I'm just saying.
No, I think the message. I mean, the thing that I could see being problematic with religions in general, or just the idea of theism, is that message of being created in God's image. So, like Elan Vital and the concern of humans being made superior to all creatures, that means we must be made from a higher power. That's not just like a Christian thing or a Catholic. That goes deep into many other religions. Most of them Western, indeed, but the concept of that going forward, I think that, I mean, maybe the realization of UAPs will help eliminate that.
But what is the Greek word for image? What is the Greek word that was translated into the word image? Right? Maybe the Bible was saying that we were created in the spirit of God. How do we know that it wasn't like that itself? We were created in the, in the philosophy of God. How do we know exactly that it meant the actual image? I mean, I don't think God looks like me. I hope he doesn't.
Right.
So
I think Dostoevsky gets some of these questions. Yeah.
Who?
I think Dostoevsky gets into some of these questions. Philosophers.
So I would get myself in trouble when I was a teenager. I would say the same things in my church, and I would get myself in trouble. My mother would be like, "Shut your mouth," So, but I think it's fair and fun to. I mean,
yeah.
I've studied Buddhism, Hinduism, and Baha'i faith or whatever, and I think
we'll just have to modify it.
I'm taking parts of all those and trying to use them, incorporate them into my philosophy of life. not just the Bible.
I mean, I think we'll have to be honest and recognize that these really big verses in these texts, these spiritual texts, must have been written by men at these times based on what they knew. They didn't know that there could be other creatures out there in the cosmos, and so we will have to make modifications to various texts, or at least like the way that we interpret them going forward. But I mean, I think that like Dan was saying, the idea that like Ernest Becker talks about with the denial of death, that's going to be at play very, very deeply. Skulls, God-shaped hole. We're always going to have like a deep. We're going to have a gullibility and a superstitious nature, but we're also going to have a deep spiritual desire and a yearning for a spiritual connection and a belief system that makes us feel good, makes us feel fulfilled, makes us feel connected, and connects us to a higher power, ideally, or at least some kind of deep explanation. Like, it doesn't have to be higher power. It could be like a broad spectrum, as you see in the Eastern practices, where I'm deeply connected with all of microorganisms and all of the greater giant organisms out there, the galaxies down to the smallest atoms that make up my hand, all of those kind of metaphors.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes me think about the theory I brought up before, I think, on the show, is just that consciousness maybe there's an evolutionary reason that consciousness would be preserved. And if you think of all the collective memories and experiences that we each have had and everyone else has had over thousands of years, for that not to somehow continue, does that make evolutionary sense?
So there's what ChatGPT says. The original Hebrew word used in the verse is that, which means image or likeness. Image or likeness. So, right. I mean, what the Hebrew, I guess, had 3 or 4 less letters in its alphabet, and the number of words in the Hebrew language was very limited, right? So, anyway, I just wanted to make that small point.
Right.
We don't know that the intent was that we were actually created in God's image. Like I would go to, Dream Studio and give a prompt to AI to say, create a character in Artisan Tony's image. I don't think it's like that.
Yeah. Sorry. And I mean, it's kind of like a little human centric too, or anthropomorphized to think that way, which would make sense. That's how we were thinking and writing like thousands of years ago, and we still are today as well. But yeah, I mean, God could be something that is, or a creator or whatever. It could be a simulation overlord. It could be the flying spaghetti monster. All these extreme examples. It could be something that is so far beyond our comprehension. I would think if it is to exist, or he or she is to exist, they very likely are far beyond anything that's in our image, and so that makes me lean towards simulation and all that. But I won't get into that. I mean, this is just how I think about it now. It's probably going to change in like a few weeks.
Yeah. I find the same thing. Every few weeks, I'll shift into a new sort of theory, or and then the theory that nothing created us. We came from nothing.
I actually think that's the healthy approach, though. When you pigeonhole yourself into one belief, I don't think that's healthy. I think your mind should be open to change.
Dan mentioned a good point, though. Like, wouldn't consciousness want to preserve itself to basically have a memory? And that basically translates back to the Akashic records and something of that nature. But if you think of our entire universe expanding as an information matrix that's drifting inwards along the habitable spiral of perception, which you could call the thumbprint of God, you would see that as the past goes away, it's because we're drifting away from the past. So it's solidifying as creation is happening. And so you could say that the past is still there, but we've spiraled away from it, somewhat conch shelling in to a center point. And so that would be creating different structures, like a flower blossoming within a 6th dimension or something of that nature.
Yeah,
very esoteric, but
no, and I love the language. I love how you can just create that language too. I actually can't wait to read through your books. But when you get deja vu, I mean, I don't even know the biology or what neurology of that experience. But when I get that, I mean, it really feels like I've already lived this moment before, as by definition, right?
Yep.
And I don't know, maybe it's just a clue to what is going on or what's behind all this.
Well, I think if we were to talk in a physics sense, in a scientific sense, the fingerprint of God would be the Fibonacci spiral, like drifting inwards in a fractal nature or growing outwards in that fractal nature.
Yeah, it's like that's such a great way to think about it too, because it's like you're looking for the traces of emergence or creation, or because that's where you can really bridge the gap between emergence and creation. Is the underlying structures that give way to, like, statistically the most life and the most kinds of life. So you see like the sacred geometry and the Fibonacci sequence in the plants, especially in the plants that are at their most exposed in nature. So they're like cacti and succulents. They really display they're basically like really dependent on those kind of structures as the way their cells are arranged, because their cells have to distribute themselves across the greatest amount of mass. There's a term for this too. I was doing a video on it a while back and I forget, but it's a really interesting phenomenon because you see a lot more creativity, I guess you could say, or like more freedom, I guess, with like plant life in the jungle and other more rainy areas. But in the desert, you see plants like very much restricted to this basically geometric scaffolding that underlies the plants in their most strained conditions. And so those kind of things are taking place everywhere. Another one is bilateral symmetry. It's certainly advantageous to evolution to have two sets of eyes, one on the other side, two brains, on each hemisphere. And as you've seen Da Vinci's what's the Vesuvian Man, there's a lot of bilateral symmetry in nature as well. So there's really rudimentary structures. I think we can see that, like, how those can be complementary in other giant scales, like galaxies, well, the spiral forms of galaxies.
Yeah, I think that the fractal nature of nature is just part of the sandbox that we were given to dwell in.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, sorry.
Is it true that there's some like correlation between the distance between sort of galaxies or and then some things on Earth, like the spirals in a galaxy?
Yeah, it's like I was writing about this a while back and I can't remember it. So the scale of the planet Earth is like to the ant, like we're in the middle size between the ant and the Earth, essentially, in scale size. And then I think it's like the atom and the galaxy. That's like a really rough estimate, but yeah, it's like the scales of nature. I did a thing on it a while back. I'm trying to pull it up.
Yeah, well, I was watching this thing the other day, and it was I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about. He had a globe, basketball size scale of the globe, and he said if this was the Earth, the International Space Station would be a quarter inch off of the right. He was showing that it was, we think of space as this far away, as far as our satellites and things like that, and he was like, the ISS is this far off of this basketball sized Earth, and I don't know why I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I saw that clip. So,
so I guess we all answer the question about. I guess my thing is, it seems like there are groups of people who are always trying to frighten us into acting, into behavior. And I wish all of the intelligence community and the government types would just stop and start treating people like adults. And you know what I mean? It's like they treat the public like children to a certain extent. And I don't know if that's necessary or not.
Yeah, everything's overclassified and way too many secrets that's necessary, and I think that's the psychology of power and control.
I don't think we have to be threatened with catastrophic disclosure. In other words, I think we can just all agree that for the sake of our society, that we need to do it a little. We need to contemplate it, right? Because I know I meant to mention this earlier, Patrick, when you were talking about the generational thing. So yeah, I think the young generation would just grow up with it per se, but we have to maintain this society until they can get to that point, until they can get to a point where they can take over society, right? We can't crash the market and our economy before they have a chance to take over. I think that's the fear, that the current generation will screw it up for the next generation. We don't want our kids having to live in caves again.
Yeah, I mean, maintaining political structure as society changes is really difficult. I think about this a lot, and I worry. I mean, it's fun to write about in artistic prose, but it's really depressing. So the idea is like so Heraclitus said that man never steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he is not the same man. And so now we can look at it like man was stepping in the river and thought himself competent and able to adapt with that ever-changing river. But now that river becomes a vast ocean of a sea of rogue waves that batters him as he attempts to ground himself and ground his station in a very unstable and unconfident world that's changing much more rapidly than what we perceive. It's like our technology goes like this, like we talked about before, or like our evolution is like this, but our technology goes like this, and our technology also does this, like an exponential curve. And the same thing is true with the way that language evolves, which I've been learning a lot about recently at Wittgenstein. It's very adaptable, very like
on that topic. Somewhat on that topic, I saw a study recently that middle school girls and boys, they're starting to show a slight, if you can see, there's a bend in their pinky from holding a phone.
No way.
Yeah, they're already starting to see evolutionary changes in our physical body with technology. Yeah,
that's wild.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're like weirdly skinny now too. Like humans probably didn't used to be like this size arm probably wasn't a thing for. We talked about that a while back too. Yeah, I think that we're probably. I mean, it's hard not to agree with you. Yuval Noah Harari. Like a lot of my thinking aligns with his in this regard. Like the process of human evolution, like we're becoming human, or Homo Deus, as he talks about it, or Homo Techno, and that's we're definitely evolving into a new species and have no accountability, or very, very little accountability of it. Like a few people are talking about it, we're talking about it. People on podcasts are talking about it. People on mainstream media sources are not. Education systems are not. Our public education systems are teaching people to be monomaths or specialists in at max 2 fields with an interdisciplinary degree, and that's really beneficial to the polymaths and really beneficial to people that are seeking nuance and seeking broader ways to view things. But it's
If you look at there's these charts that look at the origin or prevalence rates of mental health conditions. I'm a specialist in anxiety disorders, but it goes across not all, but most psychological disorders, mainly depression and anxiety, some substance abuse. But the sort of prevalence rates go from anywhere from 3 to 10% for most disorders, and they go up to 20 to 30, 35% for anxiety disorders, right at 2011, 2012. And I think the smartphone kind of came out or started to be used around 2010, maybe a little before. Mm-hmm. But it really is so linked that, and I'm not just talking like anxiety that everyone has. I'm talking about an anxiety disorder that limits, access to school or access to a job, or, consumes 4 or 5 hours a day, like a real disorder, just like a substance abuse, addiction versus substance use. But you see the prevalence rates just skyrocket. Right at that time. And so
that's something Jonathan Haidt was writing about. I recently watched a lecture of his. He talks about how the Yeah, it was social media, and it was as well the like and share function that was added around 2012. And after we saw that, we saw a tripling in male suicide attempts from ages 10 to, I think, 10 to 16, and a doubling in women. And yeah,
What's the
I
period?
didn't know that statistic. That's phenomenal.
What's the
Yes,
period
yeah.
related? Is any of that related around the COVID area or era?
I mean, we saw a bunch of. I know the research from COVID a lot. Really, sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that probably didn't help either. Like when we were isolated through COVID, things definitely spiked as well. And the impact of social media it's been massively changing us.
COVID was really interesting. So I opened up my treatment centers 3 years before COVID. The need was there, anxiety epidemic. You know, we're kind of talking about the sort of age of anxiety, age of adolescent anxiety specifically, and then COVID hit, and it was the first time in the students, we call our clients students, but the first time in their lives where a problem was real, like a threat was real, because anxiety is a perceived threat typically, and there was this real sort of panic is about impending doom, but then COVID is about real doom and threat and the end of the world. It could have been the end of someone's life or the end of the world. And interestingly, COVID increased the rates of obsessive compulsive disorder by 300%. For a period of 12 months right after, and then it went down, but still higher prevalence, really higher prevalence rates than before. And so I don't totally know the connection, like why OCD. And we also saw there's two types of OCD.
Man.
You guys might not be aware of this, but we call it classic OCD, which is, you might have an obsession as a fear of something. So a fear of contamination, and then hand washing. But there's another type of OCD called sort of bad thought OCD, which are sort of mental rituals, mental compulsions, intrusive, unwanted thoughts that you can't control, and they're disturbing, and they're things you wouldn't do, and they're irrational, but you kind of, they flood your mind. And it could be a thought of hurting someone else or hurting oneself, or, if I think this, it might have an effect on someone else. And they can kind of, they're really disturbing. And we saw such an increase in those thoughts. And, we were getting calls for panic disorder and social anxiety and trauma. But then it was all this OCD right after COVID. And I mean, we're treating it, and it's treatable. All anxiety disorders are treatable. But it's just a fascinating sort of correlation that we found.
I wonder if confinement does anything, has an effect there.
What'd you say?
Confinement. Yeah. I wonder if confinement has a.
Especially, because OCD especially is about empty time and space, or is fueled by empty time and space, which is you got time on your hands to ruminate, and that was definitely a factor.
Yeah,
we're social beings. We need each other to survive.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, so this is very relevant to what I've been studying recently. So existential psychology and existential therapy has shown me different ways of looking at the diagnostic process and the idea of like how we conceive anxiety, as if it's a disorder itself at all, or if it's something that must be treatable, or if it's something that is very much a symptom or something that can be like viewed differently and rearranged and reframed, and how much of that is symptomatic of the environment versus how much of that can the patient/client take accountability for. And there's the problem of like these two come into contention, because once you start using terms like accountability and responsibility, or ability to respond to our disordered state, we start victim blaming, or we start sounding like we're blaming the victim. And so these fields have kind of like separated, and it's very hard to use one language to describe the situation and be inclusive with the other language. Like they seem to work in contention with each other naturally. So this is something I'm working on right now, very, very deeply. I'm trying to be very careful with how I describe the situation, because it gets very political and very like can be very misguiding about how we treat patients/clients. I'm having to use this terminology because we don't know how to use the term. Are people clients, or are they patients, or we working with
totally.
therapy stuff or self-help? So yeah, the thing that I've noticed, I mean, you describing OCD, like that's exactly what I've experienced. I've battled OCD for my entire life, specifically BFRBs, body focused repetitive behaviors, where I bite my lips and cheeks, and
I treat that all day. That's like my day is like 4 hours doing BFRB work using habit reversal training.
Wow, yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, for me, the thing that helped most was honestly psychedelics, and combining psychedelics with a mantra that involved that kind of like distributed cognition perspective, where I'm not the sole executor of this thing, but I do share this body with this entire cellular network, and we're a team that's trying to get together. There's no reason for us to bring pain upon ourselves. There's no reason for my own cells to be attacking themselves in this way. The same applies to my autoimmune disorders and Crohn's disease, and I try to tell myself that as well, because we don't fully understand the placebo effect, but we do understand it is extremely effective in certain regards. We don't fully know to that extent, but yeah,
I use
that's
the placebo effect all the time with my clients.
That's amazing. Yeah, and there are a lot of therapists today that are implementing these practices.
So let me ask you a question. So because I'm a bit skeptical about the whole psychedelic world in mental health, as anyone sort of in my generation would be, and it's new. But is it somehow like you were able to separate the disorder from yourself through that journey or experience? Because one of my methods I use obviously is getting my clients to see their OCD as a separate neurobehavioral condition that needs to be treated, because there's so much shame and guilt that comes with it. Like, I should be able, some days it's better than others, therefore I should be able to control it today. Right. But I'm getting to see, if you could control it, you would. You're not fucking stupid, is what I tell my clients, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it seemed that it just did the whole thing with the serotonin 5-H2A receptor making massive connections around the brain. And I guess kind of, it's not a reset, but it just allows the brain to kind of like step outside of itself for a good few hours and really not be so beholden to itself. And I really am very careful about the word beholden and how I use that terminology, because once we start talking about ourselves as being beholden to our disorders, then we are victimizing ourselves, and then we bring ourselves into the like what Ernest Becker talked about with the undergoing state. Like, we enter an undergoing state of the world where the world's on our shoulders, as opposed to having confidence and like most often and most prominently being in a state of confidence to overcome these things, and being in at least the awareness that CBT and practices like that give us. So it was around the time I was also doing CBT practices and really establishing like top-down awareness of my own thoughts, and like the rumination that you were talking about. That in combination with the psychedelics, making the brain like a sponge and just really, really receptive to all of those very salient metaphors and frameworks that I was given, that it reduced my symptoms down to like 5-10%. And
that's unbelievable to hear. So let me ask you this. So a lot of my work is exposure therapy, and I have the privilege of working with clients daily, intensely, you know, over a short period of time, so they can desensitize to those thoughts. And I'm in the business of inducing anxiety deliberately. And I'm one of a small percentage that do this work. Most just doing process therapy or talking a lot about CBT, but not actually really applying it behaviorally. But is there some exposure component, like facing your fears through psychedelics, or would you see it more as an escape?
So that component has played part in the past. This is something I try to tell people that I work with as well. I don't do psychedelic treatment, but I do give advice. The idea is, because people are going to do these things anyways by themselves, so I feel comfortable doing that. When I did DMT specifically, I was shown my own negative proclivities in word form before my eyes. So you want to talk about like direct revelation of what needs to be worked on. It literally showed me in text form, and then they like dissolved, of course, all meaningfully. And of course, nothing changed, but it showed me exactly what needed to be working on. I mean, that's amazing.
That's phenomenal to hear that happened. Like that. I can't make that happen in my therapy room.
Well, DMT may not be the thing to use in that regard, but yeah, like the smaller ones, you'll have the big revelations with mushrooms and with LSD and ketamine.
You just have to get the parents to sign off on it, right?
Yeah, just gotta do all the paperwork. Yeah, I mean, the bigger revelation.
But that was that was basically your subconscious telling you these things, right?
Yeah,
Patrick.
I theorize.
Yeah. Was DMT T-Car was asking about? Was that the only psychedelic that you were referring to?
Oh, I can't see the chat.
It says Patrick.
Yeah.
What is the psychedelic called?
The one that I used most prominently was serotonin 5-HTOA from mushrooms from using the lemon tech method.
Is that a processed method? Is that pre-processed, or is that something you were able to process?
Well, I process, yeah. So you take the mushrooms, and once they're dry, you just grind them in a coffee grinder until they're extremely fine, and you just soak that in lemon extract or lemon juice, and then that pre-activates the serotonin the psilocin to psilocybin, and so your gut doesn't have to do that. I think that's reversed, but yeah. So it hits you faster, and it is much more efficient and much more affordable that way as well. Because you have to use way less product. But,
I would caution people, based on my bushcraft days, to not pick mushrooms unless you know exactly what you're picking.
Yeah,
because you can kill yourself.
But I mean, so the existential crisis issue, though, that's extremely not talked about. CBT as a method of handling these existential crises, or existential therapy as a method to handle the situation that we're in, is not at all educated. That's not at all in the public education system. So we see what happened in COVID. Of course, people started biting their nails and freaking out more without having any grounding, any like spiritually grounding system, or like, perhaps Eastern practice of connectedness, of like a realization from childhood of it being taught to us that we are very much interconnected. We must be responsible and respectful to each other instead of being all butthurt about having to wear masks. We're really gonna fight about wearing masks, things like that. Where in other cultures, it's just like general, like in Japan, that people will wear them anytime they're sick. They'll definitely be wearing a really nice mask. It's hard to see where it's going. I think that we need to be teaching. If we don't teach these in public schools, we're hopeless. Or at least like in major media outlets where people can get these messages. Not hopeless, but we can really direct the amount of change that we'll see in our species if we do these things right, if we really teach ourselves right.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I could talk to you for a long time if I've got more questions and more thoughts to say, but I don't want to monopolize on.
Well, I invited Patrick because.
Sorry, I talk a lot.
No, I thought you two would get along very well. I saw you two.
I've got a man's search for meaning right behind me, among other books you would probably like, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm restudying that right now. Some of the lessons I'm taking.
Oh, cool, nice.
That's awesome. You all took my mind down a rabbit hole, and I can't come out.
Yeah, like a lot of I'm working with real severe disorders, and we do call them disorders, like an anxiety disorder, because at least the clients that I work with, it's got to that point where it is controlling, it's dictating. It's really controlling their lives, and they're not able to do what we're doing now, and their worlds become smaller, and you've got to sort of demarcate it somewhere, and then post treatment, they are at a place where an intrusive thought might come in, but their body is not reacting the same way, their mind's not reacting in the same way, or they're not using escape, avoidance, reassurance seeking, some other sort of way of coping. But one of the biggest myths of anxiety is, or something that's misunderstood, is that people don't know that it's got to be linked to a fear. If there isn't a fear, it's not anxiety. And yeah, just so identifying the fear is a really important part of treatment. And I think for everyday anxiety that, most people have, or an anxiety disorder, which is, it's all about fear, anxiety, symptoms, the fear behind it, and then the behaviors, the methods of coping.
Wouldn't a lot of those sources of anxiety be somewhat subconscious? Like the people are not necessarily sure what's causing their anxiety, but they're suffering you could say something that happened a long time ago, or a traumatic thing that's not necessarily.
So this is where like the word subconscious is really important to examine, because like how much of that is subconscious, or like what is the subconscious mind, and how much of that does the conscious mind have access to, and what is unconscious.
And that's where the healing exercises using a and that's where using a psychedelic like DMT or ayahuasca or something of that nature becomes really can be helpful. Let me put it that way, because it brings the subconscious to the conscious, like Artisan was somewhat saying.
Right.
That's
and that's what therapists try to do. They try to bring the subconscious to the conscious, and when we are not able to do that, that could be, another method, a route.
Yeah, because in my opinion, it all starts with the subconscious mind. Like every choice we make, every little pacing motion we make starts with our subconscious teachings, and so that would relate directly to the anxiety, panic attack.
That doesn't mean that doesn't mean there aren't triggers, though, right? Because I know.
Yeah,
right. I know. A lot of my anxiety comes from just pleasing the customer or doing when we're building a house, we're on schedule, we're on budget, right? All of those are kind of triggers for the anxiety.
Natural anxiety response.
Yeah.
Natural to a fear of failure or a fear of letting someone down, or they will be linked to fears.
And it goes back to fear. Yeah.
Or fear of like being excommunicated by the tribe. So there's going to be natural anxiety responses deeply embedded through evolutionary psychology. That's one theory there.
So I think I was trying to answer Alexei. For me, the subconscious part is like my standards for excellence as an artisan. I have placed this on myself. That's the subconscious standard. And so these other things are triggers for my, that anxiety when I don't meet that expectation that I set for myself. And a lot of times my customer thinks, it's no big deal. You're doing fine.
You're speaking about a really important.
That's you. I guess other people have negative things that have happened to them in the past that they completely forget about consciously, but they still react to them without being aware. That's why they're even reacting in that way. And so that's where becoming truly aware of every little motion you make, right, really requires a deep dive into your subconscious.
Absolutely. And psychedelics can help with that journey, specifically like inward reflection and establishing introspection habits or habits of like inward reflection. But of course, that's not what I would recommend first. The best method is vocal therapy or like one-on-one therapy, really like being in a room with someone, because you need the expression of physical emotion and physical understanding as well. I believe you can get a lot of that from video, but
Let me
I personally don't do any of the hallucinogenic stuff, but like I know a lot of people that do, and they're even opening up like ayahuasca camps, like where they can come, explore that kind of stuff, and it's all very legal, very like controlled by the government. But like people end up, I think microdosing ends up being the best thing for a lot of people.
They're doing that with ketamine right now.
Difference for me.
They're doing.
Let me ask you something, Dan, kind of related to this catastrophic disclosure issue.
Sure. Yeah.
Before we get far down another road, I wanted to kind of ask this question, which I was interested in as far as your industry is concerned. This was one of the slides that was kind of stolen from the SLL Foundation. Is it Sol or Soul Foundation conference? Where they have this, phased disclosure proposed so that we avoid catastrophic disclosure, right? So I wonder, and down here are the objectives, I wonder though, have you ever heard of anything in your industry? And I kind of know the answer. This is kind of to spark a conversation, but I know there's no preparation for that kind of thing. But do you think at what point would your industry start like having conferences? What do we need to do to address this issue, in the coming years? You know what I mean? Would there be such a thing? Would they just meet it as it came, as it happened?
I mean, so much of psychology is dealing with typically coping with something that's already happened versus preparation for something. I mean, I guess it can be, but they're small things. But it's not like, okay, we're all going to prepare for the outbreak of World War II. and all the trauma that will result from it. I mean, you don't know. I mean, it's coping with the trauma that you just experienced through that, experience or whatever it is. But it's sort of like, I guess, yeah, it's sort of uncharted territory, preparing for potential trauma or change. I mean, at an unprecedented global level, not at an individual level. I don't think it. No, I mean, I have no idea, to be honest. I don't think it's ever been thought of in the psychological community. There's a few psychologists I know on Twitter that I've followed that are sort of talking about it, but I
don't know.
Really,
It just crossed my mind. Sorry.
Yeah,
I was just curious.
It's
I just wonder
topic.
at what point. I just wonder at what point would it become like?
Yeah, I think psychologists would probably get involved when less in the prep, but more in, okay, this information is being released and people are struggling. Like while we should be doing prevention and intervention, we still lean towards intervention, which is helping people who are struggling with change they can't handle or news they're struggling with, traumatic for some, not for others. I don't want to be just reactive. I'd love to be proactive. But it's going to be hard to be proactive on an issue like this because it's so still outlandish to 99% of the world.
Yeah. And that's kind of funny you said that, because sometimes it does seem like a bubble, a local bubble that we're in, because I mean, most of the people I talk to on a daily basis don't really think about it or they don't admit that it's on their mind, or, that's funny though. I used to get poked fun of, and Daniel Boone in the comments was one of those guys back in the day. I used to get poked about about this content from different people, but it's slowly changing to where I don't get that anymore, which it just occurred to me as I was saying that.
I mean, so let's say we got some news that there was going to be another pandemic, but it was going to be 10 times worse, and our future as a species, individually as a species, as human race, is in jeopardy. Then yes, my field, the psychological world, there's going to be a call to action, and preparing for the unknowns, and unknown and uncertainty is going to create a lot of fear, doom and dread, and panic, and suicide, and more than existential crisis. That seems like just, I mean, the ultimate, well, the one certainty is we're all going to die. And that's the primary fear that everyone has, either on a conscious or subconscious level.
Right.
And so it really depends.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, well, I'm trying to remember from the lessons I'm taking. There's like categories for existential crises, and there's one of like having too much freedom. Like Sartre talked about this. Like, man is condemned to be free, and so we can have existential crises because we get like choice paralysis, as the term is, and that one I don't struggle with as much. The one I have worst time with is the death and the meaning crisis, as well as to like what does life mean? What is the purpose of life? It used to be answered by like strict fundamentalism and religion or theological explanation, and then we had like the Enlightenment era, and since then we've been spiraling, like Nietzsche talked about. We severed our ties from God, and now we have to make a new one or whatever. And there's that. So I mean, I'm very wary of the fact that like nobody's talking about that at all in modern day education or in psychology.
No, they absolutely should. I mean, I think the biggest psychological sort of force is that like disclosure could mean something really bad's going to happen. Like, we're all thinking, everyone's so excited about it, but we don't really know like what's on the other side of it. And we hope there's going to be wonderful new technology and the world's going to become great, or we could all be fucked, right? But mortality is essential for the human race. I mean, if we were immortal, I don't know what would happen. I'm assuming we'd all eventually kill ourselves at some point along the way. I mean, it's like we need it to progress. We need it to create things. We need it to, like, I'm going to make tomorrow as best as I can make it because it could be my last day. But if I've got, many of them, just the thought of it actually is depressing. And there's some term that I heard recently that was really clever about, or smart about, just the sort of existential sort of threat of immortality or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of people have talked about that, how we need the threat of mortality to keep us interested and productive in the world. I mean, yeah, there's different ways to think about it. I definitely would like to live a few more 100 years if I had the option, but I
That would
mean,
be
Biden
nice.
just rolled out a $2 billion plan for doing longevity research and applying AI to longevity, AI and biology. And
One thing I think we should do is education. This is something. This is part of my book, The Artisan Philosophy. Not to sell it or anything, but it's coming out in the early next year.
Oh,
But
great.
what I try to do with apprentices, and my mother was good about this when I was young, is looking at your life as a cycle when you're young. And I sort of broke my life up into these quadrants, you know, where I enter this early phase of apprenticeship, then I have this professional phase, and then a mentoring phase to younger generations. And I literally exit this cycle, and the legacy becomes, the inspiration for the next generation. And I mean, I would recommend, and of course, when we're talking about artisanry, I always encourage this, to parents. Um, but I've always had that. I guess I've never had a fear of death because um, this is not bragging, but I always knew what I wanted to do, and I just planned it out and just kind of executed it. And so I expect at some point in the next 15 to 20 years that I'm in the final phase of that cycle and I'll exit, you know. But I've thought about it my entire life, so it's not going to be a shock, you know. And I've planned around that too. The property that I'm building right now is going to become my kids' property. I've
You found like comfort and acceptance that you're going to kind of
I think
pass away at the right time, which is
Yeah.
at the end of your life, which is wouldn't it would be lovely if that cycle, and it usually is, right?
But I think that part of it is, and I've failed a little bit in this, is that keeping your mind and spirit and body healthy so that you can complete that cycle, right?
increase the chances of.
I'm overweight, so I failed a little bit. I'm losing weight now, but so I'm hoping I make it. I've made it 61 years, so I think I can make it another 15 or 20. So, what I'm saying is that I think if we started training our kids to think about life as a cycle and planning their lives out, like I do with apprentices, as far as their careers and being mentors later in life, and understanding that whatever you accomplish in life is going to be your legacy and inspire the younger generations, then it's just part of the cycle of life. I don't
That's
think
never talked about. That's really important.
Yeah.
I've never actually really heard that, and mainly, it's going to be tough to teach to kids because they think about each day and they're thinking about the next 5 years. They're not thinking about their legacy someday.
Well,
But
I
to think of
know,
it in
but
stages is so important.
it's just like what we do with our Toys for Tiny Artisans. We don't talk about death when we when we give those toys at Christmas. They're just construction toys. It's like propaganda for artisans, right? And there's a Christmas card that goes along with it that says, "Hey, mom, dad, go see our website and see how your child can become part of this, part of this tradition." You don't talk about death at an early, but you do talk about your life planning and as being a cycle,
or just life planning. It's hard for people to do that.
Well,
but
my
it's so important.
my mother was a nurse and she saw a lot of death, so I guess she didn't mind. She actually did talk about.
I wish I thought about those things when I was younger. I would have saved a lot more money. I just, I would have started my retirement plan at 18 years old.
I mean, I did think about this stuff. Well, I didn't think about it. That's the thing. Like I was taught this, and I was taught like the what is it? You make like a poster board thing where you try to plan out pages of your life, and you have like a step process, like you see with life coaching, like a lot of the training with life coaching. That's basically just a ton of different frameworks are circling around that idea and zeroing in on the things that you should be interested in at this moment, and like what you should be pursuing today and these terms of times a day. But it's like life is super complicated, and when it's hard to stick to that. And I find that I keep trying to do it now, and I find it's like life is just extremely absurd, and it's always throwing you curveballs. But at the same time, I think that's the best method. Like we have to have these structures and these frameworks that keep us on the path, that keep us on the true and the narrow, because we have to like kind of avoid things in that way. Like we have to avoid the many different options, kind of like the whole we're condemned by freedom thing. Like there's too many choices, so we need to really stick to our structure and stick to our plans. But yeah,
which is actually why there's other things that have evolved, like being faithful to your spouse. You know, the one argument might be, well, you know, we were meant to just, you know, procreate, but to protect children, it makes sense to do that and stay faithful to you know, protect kids and stay married and as long as you can. There's lots of things like that you know, kind of have evolved. But I'd love to hear that you've done that kind of life coaching work. I grew up in England, and there was no self-help, there was no therapists, or it was seen as, you know, not a cool thing at all. But
well, I mean,
really,
it's like I mean, I played football when I was little, right? I mean, the coach had a playbook, right? You got a playbook for your life. It doesn't mean that, you know, the defense is going to throw you a curveball and you're going to, you know, change the plan halfway through the play. But you still have the same goal at the end, you know. And it's the same with me. I always knew I wanted to build things, and so yeah, I've had curveballs along the way. I've had to make changes, but you know, I mean, it's just I've always remained in the same industry, you know.
and don't you think everyone here has always needed something to strive towards? There's something you've got to be working towards, otherwise depression or sadness can seep in.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things we've failed in our society is that mentoring of young people, you know, and it's one of the things I talk about in my book. But I'm obviously focusing on apprenticeships for, you know, for our industry, but it applies to all. To me, it applies to all. You know, I mean, I see young kids wandering around staring at their phones. They don't seem to have any purpose in life, and it's sad to me, you know.
if you don't feel interconnected with your tribe, there are deep-seated neurobiological predispositions to make you feel uncomfortable for long, prolonged periods. That is depression. There's many different ways to look at it, but it can help us to look at it as kind of from the evolutionary perspective, I think, in this case, because it allows us to take agency where we didn't before. So if we are indeed on our phones all the time like that, we need to make changes. We need to make sure we're getting a few good hours of social communication and social interaction, lest our social skills start to decline and we develop what we call social anxiety. And then we start to say phrases like, I have social anxiety. It becomes a thing that we are beholden to, that we're undergoing, instead of thinking of it as something that is a condition that we sometimes experience long, prolonged bouts of sadness, indeed, and grieving, and all these other terms like sadness, depression, grieving, all of the different terms that you can use to go in there. We need to be bringing into our language, because the more options that you have to describe your emotional state with, the better control that you'll have over your human experience. But again, we're not talking about that at all. Public education either. The language that I mean, this is what I'm writing about mostly now, is just how quickly we adopt language without thinking about it. We're always surprised by etymology, right? Like when we think, oh, that's what that word, oh, wow, I had no idea. Yeah, it's because we're never examining where the words that we pick up come from. We just adopt them, and then we get really, really specific into them in certain fields. Like you can describe until the cows come home how evolutionary psychology, the only way to look at things, because there's mountains of books on it, and we can explore ad infinitum into that field. We can explore mountains of ways to describe how your condition is influenced by the alignment of the planets through astrology, because there's mountains of books and all that. And so what we need to do, in my opinion, is keep drawing from these fields and find the golden nuggets that each one has to apply, and closely examine the limitations of the terminologies that those fields apply and afford us. But that's
we have to push ourselves to want to learn, you know. But it's just like the reason I invite you three here is because I always learn something. I'll be honest with you. You know, 10 years ago, I didn't even know what the word etymology meant. You know, and I was brought up in the design and engineering and construction industry, and we just didn't talk about those things. But I'll be honest, a lot of my guests are based on things I want to know about and things that people I find interesting is it's not just a made up title. It's literally.
No, it's great, and it's organic and natural and authentic. And I love watching your shows. But going back to the disclosure piece, is that I think there is a role for psychologists to play. And I think that there is, you know, whatever that disclosure will look like, if it'll happen, when it'll happen, you can't prevent something catastrophic can happen, but you can prevent or help manage how one copes with it or how one adapts. I mean, we're all good at adapting. I mean, you saw how we dealt with COVID. We all discovered that we could work remotely. I mean, it was incredible, actually. We all thought the world was over, we'd all lose our jobs, and suddenly we realized I can quit this job and do this online or do this remotely. So we are by nature really good at adapting to difficult circumstances, sometimes terrible things that we don't think we can overcome. But yeah, the more and I say that as like the more notice that we have, maybe that doesn't help. Maybe I don't know. Like, would it help if we knew COVID was coming a year before?
Man, Dan, I was thinking about releasing my own series on existential therapy and like basic life coaching, or like what I've learned from hundreds of hours of taking courses and like the golden nuggets of that, and basically abandoned it because of AI, because I don't know how to guide human. I mean, this sounds like really grandiose, but I don't know how to advise people on how to be human. I mean, we don't have a manual for how to human, as the saying goes, or we don't have like a real, like, life coaching is, the term itself is kind of seen as a joke to a lot of people. It's like, how are you going to coach people on something as insane as human life and absurd and deeply experiential? But yeah, I mean, now that AI has hit, I don't know where the future is going. Like, it's so many different possibilities have now spread out before us. And the same thing is the possibility with UAPs. Like, I think that if that hits, it may not have as much impact as a super intelligence on the planet. Like, it probably be more impacting if we reach that.
That's so interesting that you guys. I mean, I'm hearing a lot about this, obviously, of the threat of AI, and I haven't really delved into that world yet, or really started to fathom what the consequences of that are. Could you sum it up for me?
It's so deep. Like, I had to give up because there's so much to fathom. Like, I have to take another year or two to really think about how to bring all this together. Yeah.
I think, right, you know, as long as any of us are alive, I don't think we have too much to worry about. You know, it's just like you, Patrick. If you had a series on the subject, I would much rather see you talk about it than for me to go into ChatGPT and just ask questions about it.
Right.
Or even see someone do a video of prompting ChatGPT to give them to talk about the answer, give the answers. I think.
But yeah, I mean,
that human connection is always going to be important.
Right. I guess, I mean, like, more so from the options that are now available to us. Like, we've never had a coaching system for, like, if people want to make a AI replica of themselves, like, deeply considering the power of that. If you have a nuanced mind that really seeks like to avoid bias and things like that, and you have a lot to offer, I think that'd be very useful. Like, I'd like to see Da Vinci reproduced correctly. We're getting there right now with Claude on forefront, but
gosh, I need to look it up. All I'm seeing is the threat that AI has on my students not writing papers, themselves.
Yeah, there's so many ways. I mean, we talk about the curveballs. Like, AI is going to be throwing us more things that we need to constantly adapt to. That's the only thing I'm really worried about, is like, we're not training our youth to be adaptable, hardly at all. But even if we could train them, can we train people to be adaptable enough to where they can now handle much more rapidly changing environments, like we're seeing between just when I grew up and just the generation after me is like vastly different between what we saw from people in like the 1900s to the 1920s. Yeah,
it's all about learning, how to think and the process of thinking versus just getting information, and that's my fear of AI.
Yeah.
One just a quick note for you, Dan. There's a YouTuber. His channel name's One Little Coder. He has basically daily or every other day videos about AI. He's an awesome channel to watch for updates on language models and machine learning and all that. It's awesome. But I don't know why I don't fear it. I have no fear at all. Maybe it's because I've been working with it for a while. I have a guy I'm basically paying to help me work out some things for my website, one of my websites, and I use it on a daily basis. And I know what people are thinking. Well, you're not really you're not delving into the philosophical, and that's fine. But I think if people would just take 10 minutes a day to delve into it, that you'll ease your fears a little bit. And yeah, sure, eventually we may be fooled into thinking that, a machine has some sentience about it. But, me personally, I don't think we have that much to worry about.
Do you guys all use ChatGPT to help you write stuff? Like you've written books, no?
Yeah, I do. I have.
I mean, I try to be very, very careful with how I use it. We talked about this on other shows. Like, it's really easy to have it do the writing for you. I just try to use it for research. Like, I use it to learn a lot faster. And yeah, that's basically it.
And what we talked about during that show was just being transparent about it. Like,
yeah, like if
I have a chapter in my book where I have a conversation about artisans and the traditions and all that, and how impressed I was with it. But that's an acknowledgement of it's an acknowledgement of the change in technology, and that our industry needs to be. The construction industry is always the last. It's always lags behind in technology. It seems like, especially in the residential realm. So the idea is to just take the fear out of it, get people involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just so that it can be a simple tool and not to fear it. And as the least amount of people who fear it, the more people who will be involved, and the more people who will have opportunities to shape how it moves forward. That's my theory. So
send me some stuff on what you're working on, because I know my wife and some friends would be interested in that. They were talking about this project of teaching kids how to build things. I wasn't taught how to fix things or build things, and actually making it a part of a curriculum. And I feel like there's some things linked here. But
that's amazing. I did have a good upbringing with that. I worked with erector sets and connects and Legos growing up, and I have a very strong problem-solving mindset. But I applied it to working with duct tape and making creative stuff in my youth. Once the CBT hit in my mid-20s or late 20s, that problem-solving mindset kind of awakened, and the mirror turned around on you, or the introspection kind of mechanism. I wonder if that's how that works.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I see a lot of people that don't seem to have a natural desire towards the problem-solving mindset. And CBT is very much about that. Of course, there's problems with the problem-solving mindset being the only solution. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be had and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's extremely advantageous in self-monitoring, ruminating thoughts, that kind of thing.
I would respond to that, but it will take us.
I don't want to get into another
discussion about that. I agree with you, but I just got more layers to add onto that.
Okay, my Lincoln Log experience when I was 5 years old led me 20 years later to building this for a customer. So
that's legit.
Yeah, the first log home I built was based on the love of Lincoln Logs, which I don't even know if kids know about today.
I had some of those when I was very, very young. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they were awesome. Yeah. But again, I mean, that was an influence that my parents installed in me. I think they saw and I'm not, this is nothing about me. It's about me trying to inspire the parents to inspire their kids to develop their desires, and not to ignore, not to let the internet raise their kids. I know that's an insult, but I see a lot of it. So I have to say, I don't guess I have to say. Anyway.
No, it's tremendously important. Make them, applied.
Oh,
Patrick, I'd love to get your info. So,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm at patrick-compton.com, but that's still under construction.
Yeah, it is, because I tried to join today and said, what did it say?
I'm extremely busy. It's so hard. I have a really hard time managing my
I'm just kidding. Okay, guys, are we good? Did we have fun? I had fun. I always have fun.
Heck yeah.
Alexei, did you have anything else? I guess we didn't hog.
No, I've been pretty quiet, just listening tonight. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hog the air time.
Yeah, me too.
I just get excited.
It's all good. I'm just hanging out.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to not be able to dominate the topic that we advertised, but hopefully we talked about some other good things.
It's funny when you're trying to come up with a show title. I never try to. I always hope it meanders. It would be probably boring if we talked about the same subject for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's
just a really very broad topic. It has a lot of impact, or a lot of possible factors and branches it could go.
Well, thanks, guys. Y'all want to hang around a minute? We'll exchange. Y'all can exchange emails or something. Because I literally invited Patrick so he could meet you, Dan.
Oh, great! Appreciate
it. I guess just real quick, let's go around the circle here. Do you guys think a proper disclosure would be catastrophic? For me, it's like, no, nothing I've seen so far even affects me. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. I guess I'll go next. I think, I don't know if it would be catastrophic. It would just be very much changing. I think it would, now that we've talked about it today, I think it would affect certain areas, like certain belief systems or certain religions may be more impacted, but I think most will be able to adapt. When it comes to certain brains or types of brains that are more naturally leaning towards consideration of humanocentrism or glorification of the human, that they'll probably experience more humility and possibly more existential problems than other people would. But we could probably teach around that, like we were talking about as well. We got to do it.
That takes one generation, in the shortest term, really. One generation to get people hooked on iPhones, one generation to get people used to this next philosophy.
And it's not to go on, but it's unfortunately what I seem to be realizing is that the technologies and the language and the tools that we latch onto most naturally are not always those that best serve us. They're often ones that serve our comfort and satiety and keep our worlds closed or smaller and more comfortable because of the compartmentalization thing the brain does. And that's where we do need to teach and youth and teach at all levels, at all ages, how to think open-minded, how to open that brain back up.
That's interesting, because we have this thing called consensus reality. And so imagine the government discloses every single thing there is. And let's say that's 100%. Would consensus reality only allow them to get to the 50% range or the 60% range?
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be good to look at statistically too.
I don't know about. I don't know that we'll ever have a consensus, but I like I was saying earlier, I think young minds are easily shaped, so they will be fine. It's just a matter of, can we preserve our society, the security and economic security and national security for them until they have a chance to get to where they can take over. I think that's and so I do believe there'll probably be 30% of 40% of humans who would kind of do things like, take money out of the bank, you know what I mean? Sell
Yeah.
stocks. I think that's going to be a natural reaction. Personally, I'm not concerned about it, but I think there will be. I think that's what they're concerned about. And I think I've always said this about Lou and those guys, is that they're doing a job, and I think they're probably doing a pretty good job of it. I don't like some of the way they're doing it, but like with the teasing of information. But I think there's probably something behind the scenes we don't know, and they're trying to deal with it, So I don't know if does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think some of the reason why they're not telling everything is because, like we were discussing earlier, every species only has their ability to understand reality. So maybe they can't say everything because they don't know everything. Like the human body itself will never be able to fully understand reality. I mean, we can understand a human experience, but that's about it.
The reverse engineering, that term is relevant here. But yeah,
I think a big factor into answering the question is what is the exact nature of that information that we discover beyond X exists out there and has visited. Okay, that's one thing, but do we know anything more about that? Is it a threat? Is it, I don't know, is it trying to help us? Is it protecting us from nuclear Armageddon? Like, there could be so many possibilities, and I think the reaction is going to be a lot based on the amount of information we know, anxiety, fears about control, and what you know and what you don't know. So I think it could. I think I don't know what it's the impact it's going to have, and I think that it's understandable that there's some concern. I know personally it had a bit of an impact, even the possibility of it. But generally, looking back at human history, yeah, it's going to be like a significant reaction, and then we'll cope and we'll manage and we'll thrive because it's in our evolutionary best interest too.
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Glad you had the last word, Dan. All right. I hope you guys will come back sometime, because this discussion is long for being over, and we can have it again sometime.
Indeed.
So thanks for everybody in the chat. T-Car, MD, Daniel Boone. Who else am I missing? T-Car. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time.